All right, so now we'll start off with analysis, PPMs, and research. All right, so the idea here is that in the previous topic we covered rules and regulations. We defined private equity by the absence or the exclusion of the rules that define public equity. And now we're going off and we're talking about how you analyze these stocks, how you make the decision about whether or not you want to buy or sell these companies, based simply upon qualitative rather than quantitative factors. So let's start off by just taking a look at the laws and rules that we'll be considering. The Securities Act of 1933 and 34 apply. Remember, 33 Act sets up what has to be in Form S1 or Form SB1, the two documents that you have to file if you're going to go public. And these are the same bits of information, the same general categories of information that are required for a PPM. Okay? In the Investment Advisors Act of 1940, that covers research analysts. Okay? And since we're going to be research analysts here, we need to be careful that if we're going to offer opinions to more than 15 people, we will start running afoul of some of the provisions of the Investment Advisors Act or some of the NASD rules. We will, of course, as always, be mindful of SEC Regulation D, which is the safe harbor passed in 1982, which clarifies exactly which transactions are exempt from registration. And we'll also pay attention to an NASD rule. It's called NASD Rule 2711. And this is the NASD rule that covers research analysts. All right, it would also apply to you as an analyst if you were offering opinions to many people about a company that you were looking at. And as far as the type of analysis or due diligence that we'll be talking about will be private placement memorandums and research reports. So let's jump right in. So first of all, let's review the exemptions from registration. Okay. So these were the broad rules set up by the 33 Act. These were all of the things that would require you not to be registered. Again, a problem with the 33 Act. It had exemptions from registration, basing that on an assumption that everyone would be registered, or most people would be registered, which is a flaw because, in fact, most people are not registered. But this is how we define private equity now, is by exemptions to the rule rather than the assumption, exemptions to the assumption. Here is Regulation D again. Again, most of the things that we're going to be worried about for the actual transactions are going to be Rules 504, 505, and 506, which defines raising less than $1 million, raising less than $5 million, or unlimited raises. We're starting to talk about analysis. We're going to start to pay more attention to Rule 503 and 501. Rule 503 talks about the requirements for filing with the SEC if you're going to do an unregistered transaction. Specifically, Form D has to be filed with the SEC, and that's basically going to be the document like the 1040 that you give the IRS. If there's ever a dispute in court or otherwise with the SEC about whether you should have registered, you go back and say, look, I filed Form D, okay? And Form D at the time told you why I did not have to register this. Rule 501 is going to help you out with which type of investors you can give this to, the terms and the concepts. Okay. Here are the disclosure documents within Regulation D. It talks about integration, within integration information requirements. It says here is the type of information that needs to be provided. Okay. And so it actually goes in and tells you for a private transaction, what do you have to include? Okay, and here are the three different categories: non-financial information, financial statement information, and if the filer is a foreign company. Okay. And here is actually what needs to be. Here is actually a private placement memorandum. So let's spend a little bit more time on this. Okay. A PPM, also known as an offering memorandum, or I think they're also going to be called offering circulars, okay? This is a document that outlines the terms of securities to be offered in private placement. It resembles a business plan in content and structure, but generally has a heavier emphasis on risk factors. And the reason that is that because, especially in the American system, there's always the threat of lawsuits, okay? And can everyone tell me what is generally the basis for a lawsuit in a private equity transaction gone bad? What do the investors say the company did to them? What rule did they violate? Anti-fraud. Okay. If you're not registering with the SEC, investors have far fewer protections. Okay, but it is Section 10B or Rule 10b-5. All right, it covers private transactions as well as public transactions. So in the private placement memorandum, all right, there are really two functions here for this document. Number one is for me, the issuer, to give you, the investor, the information you need to make a good investment. That's one issue. The other issue here is that I am trying to cover my risks. I'm trying to reduce the chance that if you sue me, that you successfully sue me. And I will assume that if you sue me, you are going to claim fraud. You're going to claim that you gave me the, let's say, $1 million for an investment in our helicopter company because you thought that we were going to do X, Y, and Z. And really, we did A, B, and C, not X, Y, and Z. All right? And we lied about X, Y, and Z. And therefore, you want your money back. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the private placement memorandum and we're going to say, look, sure, the helicopter company failed. But we told you there were risks. We went through the risks, Your Honor. And we, this is what we did. So, let's see. There's also a need here on PPMs to comply with both federal and state laws. Okay, so blue sky laws will also apply to private transactions. So you need to make sure, especially in the state of New York, right? If you're collecting money from people in New York, that you pay attention to New York securities laws, which are much more developed than, say, the securities laws in Kansas, even though they passed the first one. Okay. So here are some of the items that a PPM will include: a complete description of the security offered for sale, the terms of the sale, and the fees. So the basic stuff. Each share is going to cost $10. Okay. And of the $10, $9 goes to the company, and $1 goes to the guy who's collecting the money. All right, these would be an obvious thing, probably for the front cover of the deal. Capital structure of the company and historical financial statements. So in a PPM, what you will see is something along the lines of there's no operating history of the company, or the company has been losing money for some time, and here's the rate at which it's been losing the money. Things having to do with the financials of the company. A description of the business, again going back to the example that we've been using, we are going to use a helicopter and we are going to do fly photographers around Manhattan and take pictures of buildings from the air, and we are going to take rich people out to the Hamptons. All right, that would be our business description. We're going to have a summary biographies of the management team, okay? And if we did that, it would say that I am an owner-operator of helicopters, and I have 500 odd hours flying helicopters, and I have a commercial helicopter license, and that's all going to look great. And then we're going to put your biography up there and say, well, he's a pilot, but he's a private pilot, not a commercial pilot, and he's only licensed to fly fixed-wing aircraft and gliders. He's not licensed to fly helicopters. But we're going to get him his licenses so he can fly helicopters, and therefore the business will be a good thing. In the biographies, you would have a description of the person, so they would know the risks, right? One of the risks, obviously, would be that he couldn't get his helicopter license, right? And numerous risk factors associated with the investment. Again, this would be a much better thing if people actually used this requirement to put up real risk factors. Instead, people generally use this as an opportunity to say, wait a second, I ran every potential. There could be a downturn in the economy, right? There could be a crash in the helicopter. There could be a change in the rules allowing helicopters to fly. But rarely would the risk factors go into the specific risks of one of the two partners doesn't have a helicopter license. Okay? They would go to broad general risk. A lot of times also it's just easier to do. Rather than spending the time of paying the lawyer at a rate of $500 an hour to do his due diligence on the deal, you just take the previous PPM and you just change the names on it. Here is an example of a PPM. This is a just a sample one. It's the name of the person who's created it. Here are the we discussed the terms of the deal, right? So we're offering $500,000 and a maximum of 1.2 million shares.